When a Hollywood legend walks onto a late-night stage, respect is expected. But sometimes the spotlight becomes a battleground. This was the night Sylvester Stallone faced more than casual questions. He faced a war of words. The evening began like any other episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The lights were low, the crowd buzzed with anticipation, and the band wrapped up its intro as Jimmy Kimmel walked on stage wearing his familiar grin. He announced his guest with a joke-laced introduction, poking fun at Stallone's voice and legendary characters. The audience laughed politely as Stallone emerged, confident and composed. Dressed sharply and radiating the quiet magnetism of a man who had nothing left to prove. The banter began lightly, but the tone shifted quickly. Jabs about, mumbling muscles, and action movies replaced genuine conversation. Stallone responded calmly, his words measured but his patience tested. When his new film was reduced to another excuse to flex on screen, he pushed back not with anger, but with meaning, explaining that stories of pain, redemption, and struggle still mattered. The tension grew. Each joke landed sharper than the last. When Kimmel mocked the writing of Rocky, Stallone revealed the reality behind it. Writing while homeless. Sleeping in a bus terminal, trying to survive. The laughter stopped. The room went quiet. He reminded the host that jokes can crack dignity as easily as they crack laughs. That respect should never be optional. From that moment on. The interview changed. The audience felt it. As the host leaned harder into sarcasm, Stallone rose with restraint and clarity. Insults about sequels, relevance, and repetition were met with sharp but controlled responses. When Stallone reminded the crowd that Rocky was never just a film but a symbol of hope, the applause was no longer polite, was earned. Attempts to diminish Stallone's struggles by pointing to his success only strengthened his message. Struggle, he explained, doesn't disappear with money. It leaves scars, and it teaches you when you're being turned into someone else's punchline. When asked directly whether he felt used, Stallone didn't accuse, he simply returned the question, letting the silence speak louder than words. What was supposed to be light entertainment became something else entirely. A live confrontation. About legacy, respect, and the cost of turning people into jokes. As the tension hung in the air, one thing was clear: this was no longer a comedy segment. It was a moment of truth unfolding in real time. For the first time that night, Jimmy Kimmel looked uncomfortable. He forced a laugh and tried to brush it off with sarcasm, joking that he hadn't realized he'd booked a philosophy major. Sylvester Stallone smiled calmly and replied that he thought they had booked a host. The studio erupted with applause. The balance of power had shifted, and Jimmy felt it. Searching for control. He pivoted to a sharper question, asking how Stallone responded to critics who claimed his career was nothing more than nostalgia, that without the past, he had little relevance in the present. Stallone's tone cooled instantly. Critics talk, he said. Legends work. He didn't need to relive the past because he had built it. A heavy pause followed, then thunderous applause. Just support, but respect. Jimmy leaned forward one last time, urging him to relax and take a joke. Stallone's smile disappeared. He asked quietly whether Jimmy could take the truth. The silence that followed swallowed the room whole. Moments later, Jimmy turned to the camera with a strained grin and announced a commercial break, joking nervously about surviving it. But everyone watching knew the line had already been crossed. When the show returned, Jimmy reset his posture and sarcasm, reintroducing Stallone with another jab about age and legacy. Stallone remained unmoved, responding with a calm line that drew louder applause than before. The studio was divided now, and Jimmy could feel the audience slipping away. He remarked on Stallone's fiercely loyal fans, suggesting they still saw him as an underdog. Stallone answered simply that he was still that underdog, he just wore better shoes now. Jimmy pressed again, questioning whether it was time to move on and hang up the gloves. Stallone met his gaze and asked whether anyone would tell a soldier to give up simply because the war made others uncomfortable. When Jimmy dismissed the comparison, Stallone clarified that the fight wasn't about sequels, it was about battling cynicism, apathy, and the belief that people like him could no longer inspire. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Attempting. One last angle, Jimmy suggested Stallone's motivation was ego. Stallone corrected him. It wasn't ego, it was responsibility. You don't stop because the world tells you to, he said. You stop when you decide you're done. Jimmy tried to spin it as marketing talk, but Stallone pushed back, accusing him of turning everything into a punchline out of fear that someone might actually take him seriously. The crowd erupted again. Jimmy, visibly rattled, claimed his concern was that people believed Stallone's on-screen persona was real, that Rocky wasn't just a character. Stallone leaned forward and answered slowly. Rocky was real. Not just because he wrote him, but because millions of people saw themselves in him. He called Rocky a mirror one Jimmy seemed unwilling to look into. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was electric. The tension had solidified into something undeniable, and everyone in the room knew the moment was nearing its breaking point. Even the most composed man reaches a moment when enough is enough, and that moment was fast approaching. When Sylvester Stallone finally stood up, the entire room froze. Jimmy Kimmel leaned back and tried one last joke, asking what was next, anti-aging supplements or a reality show. The audience chuckled, but it was uneasy laughter now. Everyone could feel it. The moment had shifted. Stallone exhaled slowly and spoke with quiet control. He told Jimmy that sitting in that chair and hiding behind jokes might feel like armor, but eventually jokes stop being clever and turn into noise. Jimmy brushed it off, saying it was just television. Stallone answered that maybe that was the real problem. Everything was treated like a punchline. Even people who came with stories worth telling. Swept through the studio. Jimmy tried to laugh it away, telling Stallone not to be so sensitive and reminding him that he had taken real punches before. Stallone rose fully to his feet, his movement calm and deliberate. The audience gasped. He said he had taken enough, and that he had given enough to the industry, to the audience, and to the spirit of real storytelling. Jimmy stood as well, attempting to regain control, asking where he was going and insisting the show wasn't over. Stallone turned toward the crowd and said simply, "But I am." For a moment, there was silence. Then applause erupted, not from shock, but from solidarity. Jimmy tried to soften it with humor, telling viewers that next week they'd have someone with a sense of humor. Stallone paused at the edge of the stage and replied that next week they should try having someone with a soul. As he walked off. He turned back one final time, scanning the studio with a look shaped by years of struggle, resilience, and quiet dignity. He said he had spent a lifetime building characters who fought for something, and maybe it was time late-night television did the same. The camera followed him briefly before cutting back to Jimmy, left blinking, unsure how to recover. Backstage. Crew members watched Stallone pass by. Some clapped, others nodded in respect. A young intern whispered thank you. Within minutes, Twitter exploded. Hashtags calling for respect trended worldwide. Memes flooded timelines, including one still of Stallone standing tall with the caption, "Strength isn't loud, it's dignified." The segment replayed endlessly across news outlets, debated by commentators, and praised by fans. Actors, directors, and athletes weighed in with admiration. Stallone hadn't just walked off a stage, he had stepped into a defining moment. What began as a routine late-night appearance became a raw confrontation that exposed more than egos. It revealed values. Stallone didn't leave in anger. He left with dignity. And audiences, both in the studio and around the world, knew they had witnessed something real. This wasn't just another talk show moment. It was a turning point.